right. I appreciate everyone who's joining us for this. This is the first of what I'm hoping will become a series of videos. I'm hoping to use this in the place of doing Q&As every Saturday to mix things up a little bit and try some new different approaches to teaching the Bible. And one of those is with this. I'm hoping what I'm going to be calling unique insights, I guess. I mean, there's probably better titles. That's the one I've settled on. I'm hoping these unique insights into Scripture are going to be something that will help people, because as I've talked with Brother Hoffman about as we were preparing for this, one of the things that I've always enjoyed so much about learning the Bible and studying it and growing as a believer is just when you come to those things and it's something, the first time you're reading it, it really just jumps out to you and you've made a connection and you start going on the internet and you see nobody else has made that connection. You start thinking about it, you realize you've never heard anybody preach that before. So then you turn around and start second guessing yourself and start wondering, well, am I crazy? But the thing that's so fun is when you actually get to sit down and talk to somebody else who enjoys the Scripture as much as you do, and start running some of these ideas by them. And then sometimes they'll show you why there's a Bible reason that you're probably wrong. Sometimes they'll give you some Bible to back it up and they'll get on board with the idea. But it's just always exciting to me. In fact, completely unrelated to the one we're going to discuss today. Me and Brother Hoffman were talking just a minute ago about one that now I'm almost wishing we'd started with it because I like it so much, that his dad had taught and that he believes. And then I also have come to the conclusion about that I've never heard anybody preach it before. So that you can look forward to us talking about Leviathan sometime in the near future, and what Leviathan really represents in the Bible. But anyways, today we're going to start with one that I think is a little more simple, a little less controversial, less likely to get anybody throwing tomatoes at us or anything like that. He's going to run by me an idea that I don't know yet his approach to what brought him to this conclusion. It's news to me, just like it will be to you. At the end, I'll give, if I have any thoughts or insight into it myself, I'll give my opinions on it. But expect this to be a little bit of a shorter video, not like the hour-long Q&As. This is just him bouncing some ideas of something he's found in the Scripture off of me, and then me giving any insight I might have on it. And so, like I say, it'll be probably a much shorter video. In the future, we'll probably try to have more people involved. That way there's more potential for insight and for people to give thoughts on it. But today, just to get us started off, it's me and Brother Brent Hoffman. So if you don't know Brother Brent Hoffman, Brother Hoffman is one of our most common people to have on here for any of our online ministries. He's been a part of most any project I've done so far, and he's one of the most faithful to do the Q&As with me. Brother Hoffman, if you want, just because even though most people who know the Q&As will know you, if you want, you can introduce yourself real quick before we get into the discussion.
All right. My name is Brent Hoffman. My wife and I are, and our kids, our 5 kids, are missionaries here in Costa Rica. We are currently on lockdown again. Good old coronavirus. No, we've been here, we've been in Central America about 4.5 years. So about ready to head back in 7 weeks from today, head back in our first furlough. So if you pray for that, I'm a little concerned about the church. It's growing. It's been really good. And I'm kind of concerned to leave it, but Lord always provides somebody.
All right. And then I'll just say, I'll mention that please do pray for him with that, and pray for his family as they'll be traveling. And of course, when you're on furlough in the States, it's supposed to be when the missionary goes to rest, but it's actually just as busy, if not more busy, than when he's on the field, because you spend your whole time traveling around trying to see the churches that are part of your ministry and even meet new churches. So I'm sure he'd appreciate prayers for that part of the trip as well. All right. Well, the idea that's going to be presented to us today is the question of, was Gehazi one of the lepers you find mentioned in 2 Kings 7? And I hope I've presented that correctly. But that's the idea that's going to be presented to us. Brother Hoffman is going to give us that idea and show it from the Bible why he's come up with that. And then we'll see afterwards if I have any insight on it.
All right. So 2 Kings 7. Well, 6 and 7 is a very interesting story of when Israel was under siege, or Samaria, was under siege. And Elisha was there, and we're very familiar with Elisha. And it's a very famous story where Elisha had told one of the men of the kings of Samaria, who had been sent to kill him, he said, by this time tomorrow, the city will be open, you'll be having everything you want, pretty much. I'm paraphrasing it, of course. And he said, by this time tomorrow, everything, the Syrians will be gone. So if we look in 2 Kings 7, or we're reading verse 3. Actually, we'll start in verse 1, just to go with my story. Then Elisha said, hear ye the word of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord, tomorrow about this time shall a measure of fine flour be sold for a shekel, and 2 measures of barley for a shekel in the gate of Samaria. Then the Lord on whose hand the king leaned answered the man of God and said, behold, if the Lord would make windows in heaven, might this thing be? He's basically saying, I don't believe you. And he said, behold, thou shalt see it with thine eyes, but thou shalt not eat thereof. And there were 4 leprous men at the entering in of the gate. And they said one to another, why sit we here until we die? And this is the story. This is the same siege where the two ladies had made a pact. One boiled and ate her baby one day and then hid it, so the other lady wouldn't eat her baby the next day. So we know they're all dying of starvation. There's famine in the land, or in the city, because there's a blockade. They couldn't get in and out. And the lepers were sitting outside the city, like the good Jewish law that they obeyed. So they said, why sit we here until we die? If we say we will enter into the city, then the famine is in the city, and we shall die there. And if we sit still here, we die also. Now therefore come and let us fall unto the host of the Syrians. If they save us alive, we shall live. And if they kill us, we shall but die. And it's kind of like, it doesn't really matter what happens. Verse 5, and they rose up in the twilight to go into the camp of the Syrians. And they were come to the uttermost part of the camp of the Syria. Behold, there was no man there. The Lord had made the host of the Syrians to hear a noise of chariots and a noise of horses, even the noise of a great host. And they said one to another, lo, the king of Israel hath hired against us the king of the Hittites, and the king of the Egyptians to come upon us. Wherefore they arose and fled in the twilight, and left their tents and their horses and their asses, even the camp as it was, and fled for their life. And when these lepers came to the uttermost part of the camp, they went into one tent, and did eat and drink, and carry thence silver and gold and raiment, and went and hid it. And came again, and entered into another tent, and carried thence also, and went and hid it. Then said they one to another, we do not well. This day is a day of good tidings, and we hold our peace. If we tarry till the morning light, some mischief will come upon us. Now therefore come, that we may go and tell the king's household. So they came and called unto the porter of the city. And they told them, saying, we came to this camp of the Syrians, and behold, there was no man there, neither voice of man, but horses tied and asses tied, in the tents as they were. And he called the porters, and they told it to the king's house within. So we see here we have no one named, and the Bible does a lot of that in these stories, where there's really no one named. Jesus healed so many unnamed lepers, so many unnamed blind men, so many named beggars and cripples. So the Bible is really not all that concerned with names. But one day I just kind of noticed something. It really struck me. I found it very interesting. And like Brother Junior said, it's not earth shattering. I'm not going to base my salvation on it, but it's just something that I like to put names. I like to put names with faces. So if we go back to Leviticus 13, 45 and 46, because the leprosy is actually it was a very horrible disease. And I think it's pretty much eradicated nowadays. But actually, interesting fact, where our church is actually an old leper's graveyard. So it's a very interesting fact there. There's an old leper's graveyard there. I think it was like 75, 80 years ago. But nowadays, leprosy is pretty much eradicated. But in those days, if you had leprosy, there was no cure. You were going to die. And Leviticus 13:45 says, and there are strict rules for leprosy as well. If you read Leviticus 13, the whole chapter is about leprosy, and it's kind of a gross chapter. But verse 45 says, and the leper in whom the plague is, his clothes shall be rent, and his head bare, and he shall put a covering upon his upper lip, and shall cry, unclean, unclean. And all the days wherein the plague shall be in him, he shall be defiled. He is unclean. He shall dwell alone. Without the camp shall his habitation be. And Numbers 5:2 just reinforces this fact and backs it up. And actually, back in those days, it was perfectly fine for even good religious Jews to just pick up rocks and chuck them at lepers. If they got too close, or if they didn't yell unclean, they were perfectly allowed, according to their law, to just throw a rock at them. So they were actually kind of the scum of the scum. They were the bad people. No one wanted this leprosy. They'd hide it. If they had it, was basically a disease that eats your body away, that eats your ears, eats your fingers, eats your nose, and you just eventually die from it. It sounds like a horrible, horrible disease to have. So I'm going to go to 2 Kings 5. 2 Kings 5. Brother, how much time do you want me to take with this? I don't want to go too long. Okay. 2 Kings 5, verse 20 through 27, the very famous story of Naaman, little story, the little song, there was a man I know, a leper white as snow. He went down to the river and dipped himself. My youngest son's favorite song. We do family devotions every night, and when it's his turn to pick, he always picks that song. It does not matter where at in the Bible we are, he always picks Naaman, and so we have to do the dippy dip thing. So we see after this Naaman, he offered Elisha some gold, some changes of clothing, and he offered him all these rewards for healing him. And we know, I'm not going to take time on the story because we know the story. And Elisha said, "No, just go back to your hometown. That's fine. I don't need anything. God rewards me." But we also know that Elisha had a servant named Gehazi. With verse 20, 2 Kings 5, verse 20 says, "But Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said, Behold, my master hath spared Naaman the Syrian, and not receiving at his hands that which he brought. But as the Lord liveth, I will run after him, and take somewhat of him." So Gehazi followed after Naaman. And when Naaman saw him running after him, he lighted down from the chariot to meet him and said, "Is all well?" And he said, "All is well. My master hath sent me, saying, Behold, even now there be come to me from Mount Ephraim 2 young men of the sons of the prophets. Give them, I pray thee, a talent of silver and 2 changes of garments." And Naaman said, "Be content, take 2 talents. And this is a lot of money back then. And so we obviously know that Gehazi here was lying. There was no sons of the prophets. He wanted it for himself. And he urged him and bound 2 talents of silver in 2 bags, with 2 changes of garments, and laid them upon 2 of his servants. And they bare them before him. And when he came to the tower, he took them from their hands and bestowed them in the house, and he let the men go, and they departed. Verse 25, "But when he went in and stood before his master, and Elisha said unto him, Whence comest thou, Gehazi? And he said, Thy servant went no whither. And he said unto him, Went not mine heart with thee, when the man turned again from his chariot to meet thee? Is it a time to receive money, and to receive garments, and oliveyards, and vineyards, and sheep, and oxen, and manservants, and maidservants? The leprosy thereof of Naaman shall cleave unto thee, and unto thy seed forever. And he went out from his presence, a leper, as white as snow." So now we have the dots. We have boom, boom, boom. And now we're going to connect the dots. We know lepers are not allowed in the city. We see in 2 Kings 7, after the siege, these lepers were sitting at the front of the gate there, like good Jews. They were not going to go in. The people were going to throw rocks at them. They're going to say, "Get away, you're unclean, you're going to infect me." So we see Gehazi has leprosy. Lepers are not allowed in the city of the gate. We see these men, they found this thing. And if you look here, you might say, "Oh, this is a flimsy link," but we're going to establish it. If you look in verse 8 of 2 Kings 7, what did they take away? They took away gold and silver and clothes, just like Gehazi. And they went and hid it, just like Gehazi did earlier. And they said, "Well, wait a minute, we're not doing something right." No, Gehazi's conscience was already pricked because the leprosy he carried in his hands and his feet, wherever else he was carrying it. And you might say, "Oh, that's kind of a weak link." And yes, but we're going to strengthen it here in a moment. So he said, we need to go in and tell everyone what's going on. So we read the rest of the story, and we see the king send out some men, send out some horses, and they found out, hey, they're gone. The Syrians are gone. And they were happy. Everyone had their food. Everyone had everything that was going on. End of story. But then we go to 2 Kings 8, the next chapter. Verse 1. Then spake Elisha unto the woman whose son he had restored to life. This is a great one, Shunem, saying, Arise and go thou and thine household, and sojourn wheresoever thou canst sojourn. For the Lord hath called for a famine, and it shall also come upon the land 7 years. And the woman arose and did after the saying of the man of God. And she went with her household and sojourned in the land of the Philistines 7 years. And it came to pass at the end of 7 years, at the 7 years' end, that the woman returned out of the land of the Philistines. And she went forth to cry unto the king for her house and for her land. Verse 4, and this is really what solidifies it for me. And the king talked with Gehazi, the servant of the man of God, saying, Tell me, I pray thee, all the great things that Elisha hath done. And it came to pass, as he was telling the king how he had restored a dead body to life, that behold, the woman whose son he had restored to life cried to the king for her house and for her land. And Gehazi said, My lord, O king, this is the woman, and this is her son, whom Elisha restored to life. And when the king asked the woman, she told him. So the king appointed unto her a certain officer, saying, Restore all that was hers, and all the fruits of the field, since the day that she left the land, even until now. And so then we got to I like logical things. My dad taught me to be logical. If lepers are not allowed in the city gates, they have to live out on alone. We saw that in Leviticus 13. They shall live alone what in the world is Gehazi doing in the king's courts right now, talking and telling him stories? This is afterwards. So it shows it to me that perhaps he was one of the lepers from the previous chapter that had rescued the city. So they kind of like relaxed the rules, said, okay, you can come on in, because normal people would never get within a mile of lepers. They threw rocks at him. They made him go away. But to me, he's saying to be in the king's inner court, he obviously had some pull with the king for something he did before. I mean, he was just a lowly servant. This guy had not a clue who Gehazi was when Elisha was the prophet. He didn't know. He was just some lowly servant that poured water in Elisha's hands. But if Gehazi had done something to save the city, i.e., one of the 4 lepers, we know Gehazi was a leper in the previous chapter. It just kind of logically, to me, it just kind of you fill in the blanks there that he had done something to set him apart to get an entrance to the king, even though he was a leper. So that is my argument. That's what something I found interesting. God just kind of showed me that one day.
It's an interesting thought. I have to admit for myself, I made one big mistake coming into this, is that for some reason I wasn't processing in my mind that even though I literally just preached on Naaman like a week ago, not last Sunday, but the Sunday before, I just preached on Naaman, so I know it's 2 Kings 5. I wasn't even thinking about the fact that the stories took place in the order that they do. I was thinking of it in the other way. Now I can see a little bit more, and it makes it even a little bit more sense to me as you come into it that and this is the first thing we have to settle: is it Gehazi or Gehazi? But we'll let people listening determine that for us, because we talked about this beforehand. I've always just said Gehazi. Gehazi sounds more like a Hebrew name, so it makes more sense. But it's going to be hard for me to change 21 years of saying a name that way just to get it right. But no, it's interesting though, the idea that of course you see, because we do believe typically as people, as Bible believers, that when you want to see something, you normally go back to the last time it was mentioned or to the next time it was mentioned. And it doesn't always mean that those 2 verses connect, but it does a lot of times do that. There's certain doctrines in the Bible that are really held together by that understanding. So for me, the fact that you have him being cursed with leprosy, you have somebody sitting outside the city, the only negative I think anybody could throw up to it is the fact that he's not called by name. But also there's a lot of times in the Bible we find that you have to really study to pick out that was this person. Right. So that's not necessarily something that throws it completely down for me. It's just the one thing I could say like that would make it harder to jump right onto it is the fact that they never mention him in 2 Kings 7 by name, if it was him. But the idea though that okay, he's cursed with leprosy, and then just 2 chapters later he's one of those lepers, and even the fact that it would give a good explanation as why he was in the king's court, I actually have to say it's a good it's a good thought. It's not something I probably would have come up to on my own. It's not one that I'm not necessarily saying I'm fully on board, but it's one that I certainly can't argue with. It's one that if you believe it, I can't say no. And I actually am interested in it, where I wouldn't mind studying it a little more for myself, because you did give a good thought there. And so I was going to try to bring in a guest just to give his thoughts, but he says he has no rebuttal either. So I had one guy waiting for the next video. So you have 2 people on board who say we have no rebuttal yet. That we both think that you argued it very well in terms of presenting the idea. And in terms of like, if you preach that, like if you come to my church and preach that, I would be okay with it. It's not going to hurt my feelings because I can see it. I see how you got to that. In terms of, am I going to go out and preach it everywhere? Not yet, but maybe. Or give me a week to study it a little more, and maybe I'll be right there with you. But no, it was interesting. It's a nice thought. It's exactly what I was talking about when we were discussing doing something like this, that you see those little connections, and sometimes it's really exciting when you start to make those. And so this is a good way to start off, just by showing it's not intended to be a confrontational thing. It's just a night where you get to present your idea, then I come look at it, or I present mine and then you look at it. But I do like what you present. I think it was a good thought. I think you have a Bible reason to believe what you believe on it, and I don't have any Bible reason to disagree with you. So I mean, at that point, you have a sound doctrine. I mean, it's a Bible. It's a Bible belief. I mean, there's no Bible against it. You have Bible for it. Okay, it's a Bible belief. So if we're going to give it a grade, the grade is it's Bible sound. it's sound doctrine, I guess, at that point. But no, like I say, I agree with the thoughts behind it. The thought of how you reach there, the logic behind it's all good. So, and I think if we keep talking, if I keep going, you'll sell me on it now. Anyways, I do appreciate you joining me to do this and give being the first one brave enough to come out there and present an idea.
Spread my heresies.
Well, if it was, it would never make it to the internet. The fact that I'm already planning on uploading it, and I'm happy for it to be the first one of these we present means that it was good. You're all
good.
And for once, you don't have me. I didn't contradict you or disagree with you on something, so you're good to go. But,
that's next hour.
Yeah, that's the next time. The next time, I guess it's my turn to present something. So then you can shoot my stuff down and tell me where I'm wrong.